Henry and Amelia had been married for 10 years. This year marked their pink marriage, as they dubbed it. Together with their 5-year-old daughter, they built their life together. A journey that lasted for several years. Henry started chatting with the girl online, which led to a long correspondence. They kept in touch for 6 months, exchanging messages daily and inquiring about each other's well-being. Eventually, Amelia got tired and gave her virtual interlocutor an ultimatum: meet in person or say goodbye. Naturally, Henry agreed. He wasn't going to let a girl like Amelia slip away from him. A year and a half later, she tricked him into going to the registry office on the pretext of a simple visit. Unlike his determined lover, Henry lacked her courage. The decade flew by unnoticed, as if in the blink of an eye. Although their affection remained, love had become a calmer and more stable phenomenon, at least in Henry's perception. He was wrong, however. One day after work, Amelia walked into the mall. She needed a dress for an upcoming event and was excited for the opportunity to shop. As she strolled through the first floor, she encountered an unexpected obstacle. At first, the stranger standing in front of her was perplexing, but when she heard his voice, she froze. Amelia's lips curved into a smile. The man standing in front of her was Rinat. There was shock in her voice. It had been over 15 years since she had last seen Rinat, specifically since their high school graduation. He had been her first love, but they had decided to break up before going to university. A lot of things had changed since then. The girl experienced severe heartache from the breakup, but eventually healed and tied herself with the bonds of marriage. Now, looking at Rinat, Amelia seems to be transported to the past. She is 17 years old again. Tears come to her eyes when she looks at her lover, and he, having learned about the breakup, silently distances himself and leaves. Suddenly, she throws herself into his arms. He suggests a coffee somewhere, and Amelia readily agrees, sending her husband a message about the delay. 2 hours fly by as they excitedly exchange life news and laugh heartily. As they prepare to part, he offers her a ride home, and Amelia doesn't refuse. She longs to prolong her time with her former lover, feeling inexplicably drawn to him, as if dormant emotions resurface from the depths of her soul. In the following days, she tirelessly recalls their meeting, reliving every moment, how Rinat looked, moved, and smiled. She begins to feel as if she is losing her grip on reality. One evening, coming home from work, she notices a familiar car parked outside her house. Rinat is sitting behind the wheel and, noticing her, approaches with a bouquet of flowers. "Are you crazy? What if someone sees us? What am I supposed to tell Henry?" Amelia floods him with questions. "We'll think of something," he replies with a smile. "Just look how beautiful these flowers are." Amelia's resolve fades. Rinat suggested meeting one evening, and Amelia readily agreed. As she rode the elevator to her apartment, she couldn't contain her smile, feeling like a teenage girl who had been asked out by her lover. However, the reality was quite different. She was a 35-year-old married woman and mother. Henry came home from work later than his wife. Noticing the bouquet on the table, he was surprised to inquire about its origin. In response, Amelia made up a story, claiming that it was the company's anniversary and management had distributed bouquets to all the female employees. This puzzled Henry, since Amelia had never mentioned such an event before, but he decided not to inquire further. On Saturday, her husband and daughter left for the countryside to his parents, leaving Amelia free to meet Rinat in the evening. "Sorry, no flowers tonight," he remarked with a smile, giving her a light peck on the cheek that immediately brought a blush to Amelia's cheeks. She drank glass after glass of wine, and by the end of the evening, she was considerably intoxicated. Rinat suggested going to his house, and Amelia agreed without hesitation. The night passed like a dream, and she did not want to go back to her husband. She couldn't shake the feeling that he paled in comparison, and couldn't give as much pleasure as her date. Henry was outraged and could not understand why his wife, who had never denied him anything before, had changed so drastically. He even plucked up the courage to ask if she was expecting a child, remembering how, when Amelia was pregnant with their daughter, she had pushed him away. Amelia shook her head incredulously and grinned. "Maybe it's just some new medication the doctor prescribed for me," she replied, feeling uncomfortable with his disturbing question. Her husband desperately wanted to believe her. Renat offered to meet again. Despite all efforts of conscience and common sense, her heart and longing for her lover took over. When they met in a cafe, Renat said that he was returning to the capital. His vacation was over, and duty was calling him back. "Come with me," he suggested unexpectedly. "Don't be silly," Amelia replied sharply. "I have a child who needs a father." She was angry with her lover, and deservedly so. In all their time together, he had never once mentioned that he was living elsewhere for an extended period of time. He was just in town for 2 weeks. It suddenly dawned on her that they had never broached the subject of his living arrangements, and now he was blithely suggesting that she turn her life around with him, as if it were the easiest thing in the world. She stood up abruptly and headed for the exit. "Are you angry?" asked Renat wistfully. "Yes, you played me," the woman exclaimed, showering him with curses. "You voluntarily climbed into my bed, so spare me the innocent act." Her lover's tone turned bitter. Amelia jumped up from the table, grabbed her coat and bag, and rushed out of the cafe. She walked home feeling devastated. The journey seemed endless. But Amelia tried not to put off going home and longed for privacy as soon as she arrived. There was a surprise waiting for her at home, however, even though she was already asleep and her husband was waiting for her in the kitchen. She suspected her husband of dabbling in adult content and interrupted him, but then she saw herself on the screen. At first glance, she suspected her husband of dabbling in adult content and interrupted him, but then she saw herself on the screen. Amelia felt a chill run down her spine and her hands trembled. She shifted her gaze from the screen to her husband. "What's going on?" she asked, her words slurred. "Shouldn't I be asking you?" replied Henry icily. She noticed how tightly he clenched his fists, how his knuckles turned pale. She was afraid that at any moment he might lash out at her. They couldn't raise their voices since their daughter was sleeping in the next room. They just stared into each other's eyes in silence. Finally, Henry got up, closed his laptop, and walked over to his wife. "Consider yourself lucky," he said, "that I don't stoop to abusing women, even women like you." In a panic, Amelia started to dial Renat's number, but he had already blocked her. She couldn't realize that he had recorded their intimate moments and shared them with her husband. She could only pray that he didn't put the video on the internet. Henry considered doing it himself, but reason prevailed. He couldn't bear the thought that their daughter would one day come across such an embarrassing sight of her mother. He began divorce proceedings. It wasn't an easy decision for him, for he knew he would see less of their child, and their bond was his most precious possession. But he couldn't stay with the woman who had betrayed him. He felt that to forgive his wife was to lose all self-respect. Amelia and her daughter moved in with her mother, since the apartment belonged to Henry's family, and his mother insisted that Amelia leave the apartment as soon as possible. 6 months later, she lost her job, a solid position, and had to take a job at the nearest convenience store to support herself and her daughter. Henry helped her with some of her expenses, but she had to rely on herself. With one reckless act, Amelia ruined everything.